Hello and welcome to Local Writers Read. We are back for our 2021 virtual season. And I know we're very excited to be coming back around to keep doing this year after year and to keep connecting with the Maine literary community and all the wonderful people who have tuned in and supported us just all this time. And as always, we want to start out by shouting out to Quiet City Books, who in normal times would be hosting us, and the Lewiston Public Library, who co-sponsors this series as well with their support. And we're really excited. It's good to be back, and we are looking forward to bringing you a great lineup of readers this weekend and also in the coming months. We've got some really fun people, familiar faces from the series in past years and some new faces that we'll be excited to bring. If anyone is discovering Local Writers Read for the first time, we are a literary series that spotlights Maine writers in various genres: poetry, fiction, nonfiction, and really at all different stages of careers. We have published authors, we have people who are working on their first books or published works, and everything in between. And it's really just a chance to bring the community together. I'm here with my co-organizer, Claire Guyton, who will introduce herself in a moment. But I think the only other thing to say right now is that each of our events has a theme. And so our theme this month is Memory and Yesterday. And so these themes we encourage all of our readers to interpret as broadly as people feel like and find different ways, fiction, nonfiction, personal, and expressive in all these different ways to kind of tackle what these themes look like across creative writing. So thank you for joining us. We'll be streaming tonight, obviously, and then tomorrow afternoon as well. So check our Facebook page for the full details and lineup. And tune in. And Claire, I will hand it over to you for them now.
Thank you. Happy spring to everybody. And I will add my welcome to the launch of our 4th season of Local Writers Read, our 2nd virtual season. Hopefully we can get back to doing this in person before the season is out. But here we are again with the magic of Zoom and Facebook. Josh, we're going to get you to start us off this evening. Josh is a playwright and fiction writer with a focus on speculative fiction. His work has appeared in Non-Binary Review and the Stone Coast Review. His play of Murder and Madness debuted at the Footlights Theater in Falmouth in 2019. He just released his first book, Land of Outcasts, a fantasy adventure novella that he's going to read from tonight. Connect with Josh at joshgauthierwriter.com. Then we'll hear from Sarah. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, Esquire Magazine, Scary Mommy, Atticus Review, and Water Wheel Review, among others, and is forthcoming in Prairie Schooner. She's a finalist for the Maine Literary Awards and is the recipient of the Glasscock Prize in Poetry and the Catherine McFarlane Prize for Fiction. She lives with her family in the woods of Central Maine. Sarah is a good friend of the series, and we're thrilled to have her with us in our first event of 2021. All right, Josh, we are ready whenever you are.
So for anyone who has followed me or this series, I've read excerpts from Land of Outcasts before, but this year it actually came all the way through to publication, so I can now read from a fancy print copy. And I'll just throw out there, if anyone is interested in a copy, Courtney at Quiet City Books does have them in stock, so check out her website if you would like to find this. So I'm going to be reading a little bit from chapter 16, which is a section I haven't actually read from before, I think, in any of my events. But it fits with the theme, I think, pretty well. And the book is fairly humorous, and this is a slightly more serious section, so I wanted to shake it up a little bit. The only backstory that people need to know is that there are 2 mercenaries, Eli and Sasha. Eli is human, Sasha is a battle unicorn. They've been hired by a woman named Marion to go out into this expansive swamp to find her father, who was banished previously. And while there, they discover a 4th person who knows Marion. His name is Merrick. They save him from some trouble. And during that exchange, they realize that Marion has been keeping secrets from them. And so during the scene, they're returning to their campsite to try to get to the bottom of what they have not fully been told in the past about why Marion's father had to leave, allegedly. So chapter 16. The quartet returned to their previous campsite to bind their wounds and eat a short meal in silence. While they waited for the full explanation as to why they were wandering through this poxy wetland, Eli tried to sort through his own feelings on the newest revelation. It was frustrating enough to be kept in the dark, but now with the truth in the open, he mostly blamed himself. He should have seen the truth on his own. From what he knew already, he could understand Marion's desire to keep her connection to Dahlia a secret. Dahlia is the leader of the town where they first met Marion. It did further complicate matters, but did a 20-year-old accusation change what they had been hired to do? With the meal cleared away, everyone waited on Marion to begin speaking. I have so many memories of my father from when I was young, she said, gazing into the fire. He would tell me stories of the world beyond the green. During storms, I could huddle in his arms in front of a crackling fire and listen to his voice paint entire worlds in my mind. He always listened when I needed to talk. It didn't matter how big or small the matter might be. She seemed almost to be speaking to herself. I knew that my parents had their differences, but they always seemed happy enough. They didn't want you to know the truth, Merrick said. Your mother in particular. I will not have you contradicting me every word, Marion said, turning her glare on him. This conversation would take forever with them disputing every piece of it. When you're finished, he said, keeping his voice amenable, Merrick can give us his side of the story, each person in turn. Marion didn't look pleased. Fine, but remember that none of it's true. Merrick's face showed nothing as he waited for her to continue. I remember my father's smile, Marion told them. I remember every one of his favorite tales, of fairies and great serpents, of heroes and magic and unicorns. She gave Sasha a brief glance. Every memory of my father is warmth and happiness. He taught me and he cared for me. Even then, Dahlia was too busy running the folly to pay much attention. And I know she had a lot of responsibility to face. I know all she's done for the settlement. But she was always more concerned with the greater good than individual people, than her own daughter. Marion touched the pendant hanging around her neck, a bronze disc on a leather cord. On the disc's surface was an ancient symbol Eli didn't recognize. Knit leg curled up asleep on Marion's shoulder. He gave me this, she continued, before he left. What do you remember about that day? Eli asked. I remember that he and Dahlia began to fight. It happened quickly. My father told me that he wanted Dahlia to understand what was important for our family, not just the town. He talked about the future, about how these things would be better. Then, one morning, I woke up and he was gone. And Dahlia was telling everyone that he was a black sorcerer. There was talk of murder and blood magic and secret rituals. Dahlia ran the town. My father took care of me. It's hardly surprising that everyone took Dahlia's word as truth. My father was vanished before I could even say goodbye. And from that day till now, Dahlia has maintained these lies about him. She won't give me answers, won't tell me what they fought about. She looked at Eli, eyes shining with pain. I have to request permission to see my own mother. And even when she has time to see me, she doesn't look at me. Not truly. It's always the same story, the same excuses. And she gets upset that I'm the only one who dares question her, the mighty overseer. She chose the town over our family, so I'll find the truth myself. Silence followed, a silence filled with the crackling flames and cries of animals in the darkness. Knit woke and leaned against the side of Marion's head, brushing away a tear from her cheek. Merrick took a breath, looking at Marion as he spoke. Your father loved you in his way. No one has ever denied this. He hid his true nature well, from you most of all. But he was a mage, and Dahlia caught him in the middle of a blood ritual. She saw it with her own eyes, saw him draining the life from innocent people to feed his powers. You weren't there, Marion said. You're just choosing her story over mine. I've seen the artifacts from the ritual, as you have. Easy forgeries. Marion wouldn't meet his eyes. Be careful accusing anyone of being associated with blood magic, even in forgery. Your mother did not make those evil things. Stories, Marion said. All stories. I knew him. I was there. But you'd rather trust a lie and a bit of blood-stained fabric. Your mother was only trying to protect the folly, to protect you. Emotion deepened on Merrick's face. It hurt her to banish Eric, more than you know. Don't say his name like you knew who he was. Don't talk about hurt. Dahlia operates on self-preservation, not feelings. Merrick's eyes never left the tears on Marion's face. She has sacrificed much in her time. Eli did not rush to break the heavy silence which had followed, but it seemed that what needed saying had been said. You are determined to see this through? He asked Marion. I am. Beneath the tears, beneath the sorrow, he saw the determination that burned within. He nodded. Whoever this Eric was, if he was still alive, Eli would find him. That much hadn't changed. Dahlia tasked me with returning you to the folly, Merrick said. I hoped I would find you willing. Marion turned to him again, defiance written across every line of her face. Even Nick glared at the guardsman. But, Merrick continued, you will not rest until you see this finished, will you? I'm bringing my father home, Merrick. The guardsman was solemn as he said, then I will help you see this through. I don't need your help. It's not a question of need. Marion, will you look at me? Slowly, tears still glimmering in the firelight, Marion raised her eyes to Merrick's face. I am here on your mother's behalf. It is not a question of your ability. She loves you, and my orders are to bring you safely home. I will remain at your side until that task is complete. Fine. Marion's defiance did not fade, though something wavered in her expression. But out here, you answer to me, not her. We are going to find my father. We are going to prove him innocent. She turned to Eli and Sasha. What about you? Do you have anything to say? There was a lot that could be said. None of it felt like it would do much good now. I wish you would have told us at the start, Eli answered. We still would have taken the job, and it would have saved a lot of suspicion all around. Marion looked between them. And that's it? You're the one with the silver. We'll see the job finished. And they would. Where Eli led, Sasha would follow. Talk of blood mages was troubling, but it was an accusation he had heard flung at enemies often enough, mostly with no real truth. Magic was rare, and blood magic even rarer. As long as they weren't walking in blind, Eli was more worried about surviving the swamp than a family feud 20 years old. Good. Marion looked at each of the others in turn, emotions warring behind her eyes now that their course was set. Merrick, you take first watch. We'll get some rest and press on in the morning. We should be getting close. And that's the end of the chapter. Thank you, and I will hand it over to Sarah.
Josh, it's so fun to see you holding a book. Can you hold up the cover again? It's so pretty. Let us all take a gander. Very cool. It's so fun to be back at Local Writers Read again. You guys do such a great job pulling this series together. You are always so well organized. It is a pleasure to be part of this, and a pleasure to get to write to a theme, or to put together a collection on a theme. So I've been writing a lot of nonfiction lately, but when I saw what the theme was, memory, and yesterday, I returned to some of my fiction, which is very scarier for me to read fiction than nonfiction, which is interesting. But I have a sort of series of pieces that are part of what might be a novel, but it sort of addresses the question of what happens when you get stuck in memory, what happens when you get stuck in yesterday and trying to sort of figure out a way to go forward. And then the narrator within the story itself is also wondering sort of what happens if you can't move forward from something bad that's happened. It will make more sense when I start reading, but anyway, I was very excited. So this is me reading something I'm nervous about, but I'm excited to have a chance to share it. And I'm going to have a timer going because I'm not sure exactly how long I'm going to run for, but I promise I won't run over. Okay. So this is from a novel in progress, untitled as of yet. I have a picture of me at Bridge House perched on my desk. It's tucked behind letterpress birthday cards, behind a cardboard bird, a glue stick. It's a Polaroid, foggy and blurred, as though the girl inside is staring back from across the veil, like she's at Bridge House still, stranded, tethered, perpetually finishing a cigarette. She stands at an awkward angle, as though the photographer has caught her mid-exhale, poised to go back inside, and insisted she pause, turn, wait, smile. The girl in the frame is so small you can't see her face, just a pale smudge, the sense of a smile, a whisper of movement. It's me. I know it's me from the way my muscles clench, the way my stomach drops when I look at her. I know by the way I've carried this picture for 18 years, by the way it has claimed its spot on my desk, this sacred space where I work, where I write, where I unlatch the cage of my chest, pry open my ribs, and let myself bleed. It was Georgia who took the picture, took it the day I graduated, the morning I packed the last of my stuff into a garbage bag and threw it into the trunk of the ancient Subaru I'd managed to borrow. Georgia had OD'd in the basement of the house 3 days before I moved in. She was rushed to the ER where she lived, but only after they pounded on her chest and shot her through with Narcan. She lived, but got kicked out of the house, and I took her bed. But I didn't hear the story of how she'd left until months later. She won an Emmy once for set and lighting design back when she still worked, when she could still work in that way. Now she lives in the small town of Cooper's Corner, always with a dog or two, always in varying states of sobriety, and renovates her apartment over and over, does it herself because that's work she can still do. The Emmy stands on a shelf, perpetually covered in sawdust. Staff banned her from Bridge House, said she wasn't allowed back on the property ever. They wouldn't even allow a dispensation for my 10-minute graduation ceremony, which I was surprised Georgia even wanted to come to. We weren't friends, but we were something. We'd slept in the same bed, stuffed our clothes in the same set of drawers. I had followed after her, like a shadow, filled the empty space she left behind. I find myself mulling over this grainy story sometimes, that if Georgia hadn't died or almost died, I wouldn't have ended up at Bridge House. I would have languished on the waiting list until I was probably dead of an OD or Hep C, or I might have wasted away pound by pound until I was nothing, like I've watched so many addicts do. Georgia took the Polaroid early that morning and returned that afternoon, having turned it into a graduation card. I was surprised she knew when my graduation was, that she tried to show up, that she did show up and waited. Even when staff forced her off the porch, she waited on the sidewalk, kicked at a pebble until I could come outside, until she could hand me the card and say, good luck. In the picture, the house is a ghost, disintegrating, a hazy version of itself, both there and not, with some shard of my heart stuck inside. Even when I turn away, I can feel that card staring back from its perch on my desk, this artifact pulsing with grief, asking why I can't leave it behind, why I can't stop chewing it over after all these years, this pile of years, this heap of years, years let out and wound like yarn. This memory still burns. The day I arrived at Bridge House, I carried all my possessions in a black garbage bag, a heavy, shapeless heap of plastic that tore as I dragged it up the front walk. The house was the only Victorian on the block, a 3-story relic with a wraparound porch and peeling white paint. It was located weirdly in the middle of a brightly lit parking lot. Across the street lay the county hospital, a complex that had grown up and around the house, gnawing at the edge of the property until by the time I arrived, the house sat in the middle of the visitor parking area, an island surrounded by a black sea of macadam. The front porch overlooked the hospital's main loading bay and a heating conduit. At all hours, my window was full of light, floodlights from the parking lot, street lights, blinking red and white ambulance lights, porch lights, the red neon of the exit signs, the constant orange glow of the loading bay. When the rest of the town had fallen to shadow, Bridge House was still aglow, lit like the display of a department store window. It was a halfway house, but during the year I lived there, no one explained halfway to what. The house director, the Gorgon, conducted our intake interviews, sometimes over the phone, sometimes in the office, with a voice like gravel and a sneer that could turn you to stone. She filled out the required forms, asked us the required questions. Yes, we had been homeless for 3 years, and yes, we had children, or no, we had never been pregnant, or yes, we had been pregnant, but no, there was no baby. The form didn't have space to record our children's names. It did, however, record that Rocky had overdosed twice. Bam Bam had been to rehab 4 times in the past year. Yes, Serene's husband was abusive. V had 1 son, but no, she didn't have custody. The form didn't ask how I had found heroin at 12, but the Gorgon went silent when I gave my age. A momentary yaw, an involuntary catch in her voice that led me to believe 12 was young, even for a halfway house. In winter, when the cold was brutal, the waiting list for admission could be as long as 4 months. In the summer, as short as 2 weeks. Either way, everyone waited. V waited in a state-run psych ward, passing the days with group therapy and macrame. Serene on house arrest at her mother's place, where her 2 kids would remain until a judge deemed her a fit parent. Bam Bam spent her time waiting in a gated rehab facility, waited for 4 months as her name line by line climbed the list. Rocky moved into the house from detox. Deirdre from federal prison, me from the county lockup where a judge had suspended my sentence and ordered me into treatment. When we arrived at Bridge House, unsteady and unsure, along with our bags, we carried our waiting. The house had 13 beds spread between 7 bedrooms, but only 2 bathrooms. Over the course of my time there, 76 women came and went, some staying for a few months, others for a few days. I lived under the jurisdiction of 7 staff members and watched 5 roommates come and go. At Halloween, we joked parents should bring their children to our door for trick-or-treating and use us to scare their kids. This is what happens when you don't do your homework. This is where you end up when you don't listen. But no one ever came. We sat in the overstuffed chairs of the living room and ate the candy ourselves. We watched horror movies and laughed at anyone who screamed. But when the candy bowl emptied and the credits rolled, we were all too scared to get up. We knew in the dark caves of our bedrooms, we'd be left with the creaking of the house, the fractured shadows cast by the fractured light, and the groan of our own thoughts. At 11, we went outside to smoke our last cigarettes. Every morning, someone swept away the ashes, emptied the butt cans, and readied the ashtrays for the next day's ends. In the rain, we hunkered on the covered porch and listened to the pitter-pat against the old shingles. In the heat, we complained about the burn and rubbed ice cubes on our necks. In winter, we stole each other's coats. We never smoked out back. We liked the view from the front porch, the dark husk of mountains in the morning and the swath of the sunsets at dusk. When the pink of the sky overswept the town, we forgot about the parking lot and the hospital, the roofs and the wires and the dumpster. The house was the only thing we knew well, although we didn't know it completely. The 3rd basement step creaked and no one had lived there long enough to know why. There were 4 deserted bikes in the backyard. None of us had lived there when they appeared, but we liked having them, rusting and leaning against the fence. We didn't know why the garbage bags were stored with the coffee filters in the 2nd kitchen drawer, but we didn't move them or anything else. Kitty litter went next to the board games, paper towels in the basement behind the canned goods. We slept on jail beds and fought over foam egg crates. We said good morning and cooked on an industrial stove. We kept boxes and bags in the basement, marked with the names of residents who had left for the weekend and never come home. We gave directions by telling people to follow the signs for the hospital and then for the visitor parking area. We were easy to find. At 11 o'clock, day staff went home and night staff arrived. At midnight, they locked the doors. The last resident awake dialed 111 on the payphone to silence the dial tone, to silence any trouble that might come for us overnight, and left the receiver dangling at the end of its metal cord as they made their way to bed. My roommate had the largest breasts I'd ever seen and a temper like a hornet. She had these wide hips that forced her to walk with a swagger. When she spoke, she cocked them to one side and puffed out her chest like a rooster. Her name was Tamara Takata, but everyone called her Bam Bam. When she appeared in the doorway of our room, she hushed me with a wave of her hand. I already know who you are, she said, eyes drifting quickly over my belongings, which lay strewn on the floor at the foot of my bed. What I don't know is what brought you down, and I'm not going to like you till I know, and trust me, you want me to like you. How'd you roll? What's your pleasure? What got you high? Everyone had their own way of asking and their own answer. Druggie, addict, dope fiend, junkie, tweaker, until Bridge House, I had no idea how many ways you could describe what we were. I'd never called myself anything. I looked up at Bam Bam, my body an empty void, a cramping, aching void, unsure of anything except that yes, I wanted Bam Bam to like me. I needed her to like me. Are you dumb? She asked me, peering into my face. No, I said. No, she asked. No, I said again. I don't think so. Well, we'll see. Maybe you got brain fog. What's that? I asked. What's that? She echoed. You are dumb. I'm not dumb, I assisted. Just empty, I thought, and that's different. But then, as though I were dumb, she started to explain everything. Most of the shitheads in this house, she said, are alcoholics. Alcoholics are grumpy and angry and act like they're the center of the whole damn universe. We don't get the homeless, scabby drunks here, not in this house, she said. They end up over in the psych ward. Our drunks are homeless mostly and clean mostly. It's the crackheads and meth heads you've got to watch out for. They'll steal anything, but they're easy to spot. Skinny and jittery women who can't sit still or shut their mouths. They're all wound up even when they're clean. Pill poppers, those are the ones I watch out for. They lie better than anyone and steal twice as much. And they look normal. Hair all done up, makeup done right. Keep clear of those pill poppers. Other than Rocky. Rocky's okay, but don't tell her I said so. That little shit has a big enough ego already. Stoners, she explained, were lazy and would screw you over if you let them, convince you to do their chores, fake sick to get out of cooking. And then there were the junkies. Bam Bam had a small sliver of respect for junkies, the intensity of their detox, how long it dragged out, how strong their cravings were. They relapse all the time, she said, but they're fun while they're here. What are you? I asked. Chest and chin jutted. She said, I'm a pothead, but sure as shit not lazy, so don't waste your time thinking it. How about you? Bam Bam had this aura, a gravitational force you couldn't help but be attracted to. I wanted desperately for her to like me, and I wanted desperately at the same time to punch her in the face. I'm a junkie, I said. Cool, she said, her shoulders dropping, feathers unruffling. You smoke, she asked. I did. Come on, she said. We sat on the porch in the pair of dilapidated rocking chairs overlooking the valley below, smoking our cigarettes. Back and forth, she rocked, the rocking chair whining with each rock. We both smoked Newport 100s, which made Bam Bam smile. Someone I can bum from if I run out, she said, gesturing from her pack to mine. And then after blowing a column of smoke out the side of her mouth, she asked what I thought of the place. I'd been there an hour, maybe two. I hadn't had a closet of my own in 3 years, not since I left home, not since I was 15. I thought how the foyer of the house was a cave, musty and cold. An old brass chandelier hung from the high ceiling, casting a dim glow. Inside, the air was thick, like breathing 100 years of dust, like suffocating. Nothing about Bridge House felt like salvation. It's creepy, I said. No, it's gorgeous, she said, and you know it is. Bam Bam and I smoked the rest of our cigarettes in silence, the cones of ash burning down to the filters before we stamped them out and filed back inside. Thank you so much for letting me read.
Thank you so much. Thank you both. Such different pieces. And we'll see that again tomorrow afternoon. There's something about this theme, memory, and yesterday that has inspired a really diverse collection of voices and sub themes. Thank you both. Again, Sarah, I have to say that there's something about Bam Bam that sort of really lifts the darkness of that piece. And you want to kind of like her too, as a listener, you want her to be your friend. So that was great, introducing that character. I've read some of your other pieces from that work, and I remember Bam Bam from another one, but you had only briefly mentioned her before, so it was nice to meet her a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off our chat, and I have a question for you, Sarah, which is that I know you've been thinking a long time about shaping this material, and you've had different ideas about what form it should go in and what perspective you should have and point of view and even tense and all that. And as you were reading this particular chunk of it, I was thinking a lot about how the house itself is the focus and how it's such a character in the piece. And I wonder if you think about it in that same way.
Such a smart question. Yeah, I do. And at one point when I was experimenting with how to access this material, I actually had the house as the narrator, and I was like somehow writing from the point of view of the house. You know, a halfway house is a really transitory place. The only thing that is really permanent is sort of the rules and the structure itself, and people come and go and come and go and come and go. But it's weird that there's like a culture that is steady and that remains. It's almost like college, right? People come in, people come out, and yet when you meet someone who was there at a different time from you, there's still this sort of camaraderie. So in a way, sort of the house is the constant of the story. It's like the thing that goes beyond time. It existed before the people got there. It will be there after they leave. And so it's sort of the grounding force, at least in my mind, as I write.
Oh, we can't hear you, Sarah. You're frozen in time, it looks like. Josh, you're still with me?
I am still here. Yeah, we'll give it a moment and see if Sarah makes it back and pick up from there. In the meantime, while we're giving it a second, for anyone who's listening in, feel free to drop comments or questions in the Facebook comments. I will be keeping an eye on that, and we'll get to any of those that we can. If you have questions for me or Sarah, or just anything in general that you'd like to pass on.
Josh, why don't you go ahead and talk about a little bit about your piece. We were talking about this before, and I've talked to a couple of other writers recently about this, fiction writers, about how those of us who write fiction often write it because we feel like we can sort of deal with our own experiences better through fiction. And I was thinking about that as Marian was talking about her parents, and I was like, what is Josh working out here about his parents? And now I don't expect you to answer that direct question, but I thought you might talk a little bit about how your personal life winds up being in pieces of fiction, and nobody would guess that it's really there because of the creatures and the otherworldly things you write about.
I think my internet went out.
Yes, she's back. I just asked Josh a question, so I'm going to let him answer that, and then you jump in when he's done and get back into this chat. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the things I've talked about as I've been doing book events and stuff. And it's funny because this whole novella started out because I wanted to write about a battle unicorn, and I wanted a fun adventure story. And so like that was what I set out to do. Mm-hmm. And then as I was going through this, I realized that like home and family were really kind of a central theme for all of the characters involved, which was not something I planned, but as I was getting to know them more and just kind of like their motivations, that was really what came out, because Sasha and Eli really have no home base. They wander through the world. And so belonging and connection is really something that they're both working through in various ways. And also for the story in the character of Marian for this excerpt, that character started as I needed someone to employ them to kick off this whole adventure. And so that was her starting point. And then just the idea of trying to find a father, like it seemed like a good idea at the time. Like it was a plot point I could work with. And then I started writing it, and it took on this whole kind of depth, and her relationship with her mother who is estranged and her father who is banished really becomes one of the kind of central emotional pieces of the story, particularly in the second half, which was interesting because obviously I have not had a parent banished for accusations of blood magic and those various things, but I've realized that family is one of the themes that comes up in my work in various things. The play that we mentioned in the bio of Murder and Madness also had some very strong kind of family themes at the core of it. And so through these different characters in very different kind of situations, I found myself just kind of exploring what those relationships look like when they're good, when they struggle, and when they go bad, and kind of what does that mean for the characters involved in it, kind of all along that spectrum, because there are some really good, like strong, healthy bonds, and then there are ones that are struggling a little bit more. And yeah, like understanding my life and the lives of friends and other family members and just people I know, like life is messy and we all go through these connections and interactions, and relationships have ups and downs. And so being able to kind of look at that through these characters and kind of understand things a little differently really finds its way into the fiction. So it's not a direct like one for one representation, but it's something that I think about, and I think something that we all see in day-to-day life. And that was kind of what ended up being the emotional core of so much of the story, was looking at those relationships in different ways. Because I mean, like we say that fiction is the lie that tells the truth, and so that's one of the fun things that's really fun to see play out and really elevate things. Like the adventure story is great and fun, but it takes it to a whole nother level to be able to say something meaningful, or at least examine something meaningful in the midst of doing it. So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, it does. It makes sense. Sarah, I had asked Josh about how sometimes we fiction writers use fiction to tell the truth, and that some of the things that we're working out can sort of be read between the lines of the made up stuff that we have on the page. So if you want to speak to that as well, or if you had another comment or question for Josh, feel free to jump in with that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and in part because what I'm writing is autobiographical fiction, which is this weird world of like what happened and not what happened at the same time. So just like Josh said, it's sort of making a lie to tell a greater truth in a way. So it's something that I think about a lot. And sometimes nonfiction, like, back to memory again, how trustworthy is memory, how factual is memory, how much can you check and how much can't you check? And so what should be called fiction and what shouldn't be called fiction. But this, I think, part of what has been a real struggle in making my way into this novel is separating out what happened from what the story needs to be. And so, yeah, you can read between the lines and sort of get a sense of what someone is struggling with in real life and what topics are interested to me and what kind of conflicts are really interesting and come up over and over. So I know that the art is different from the artist, but I think in a lot of ways you get to know a writer through what they, especially when you read more of their pieces, what they come back to again and again.
Yeah, and Sarah, I just want to say as well, I think that it was a scene from this novel is the first thing I ever heard you read back like when we started Local Writers Read. And every time I hear pieces of this novel, I'm just struck by like, it's so raw and personal, but at the same time, just like so deeply human. I think just in how you present it, exactly like you're saying, just really kind of getting to those experiences. And it's always just so remarkable hearing the work that you've put into it. So
I wish I were further along than I were 4 years ago, but in some ways I'm spinning my wheels. Josh, I would love to hear you talk a little bit about your interest in the battle unicorn and how that kicked off this whole story. That like you hooked me with that. I also have a child who is obsessed with unicorns, as was I, as all the way through.
yeah, no, definitely. The unicorn is like the selling point for this book. It's the thing everyone wants to know about, and it's honestly how I pitch the book to people. I'm just like, it's about a battle unicorn. You should go read it. but yeah, no, really, unicorns are so kind of culturally familiar, and they're familiar in a way that I want to kind of shake up a little bit. So the kind of more delicate, peaceful, white, shining unicorn is very familiar in a lot of things. And that's a perfectly good representation with a long history. But I basically, when something is familiar, I always want to break it just to see what'll happen. And so in a lot of my writing, I like kind of playing with the tropes and familiar, especially in fantasy, there's a lot of kind of familiar characters. And so instead of a white, peaceful, magical unicorn, I wanted this big, hulking, black, scarred, snarky battle unicorn, just because it was the opposite of what people were used to. And then as I just kind of started playing with that idea, Sasha emerged from the idea of flipping things. And then I paired her with Eli. She's very intense. Eli's very laid back. And so they made this odd couple pair. And then I just kind of set them loose in this world that was fantasy, but even setting it in the green is not your typical kind of European fantasy setting, which is often very familiar in the genre. And so it was very much just, I want things recognizable, but also to kind of spin them in a new light. And Sasha felt like a voice that wasn't as common in the genre, and she's so much fun to write, and people seem to have fun reading her as well. So it was part of just why the book was so much fun, was to see where that all led.
Well, you definitely coined the term battle unicorn, right? Like I'd never heard that before.
That is not a pairing of words I have ever heard before
Right,
either.
that's what I thought.
I cannot say 100% I'm the first one to do it, but I did not take it from anywhere else.
It's my favorite thing about the story, just battle unicorn. It just makes me happy to hear those two words together.
Yep, I was definitely sucked in. And I will go and tell my children about it, and they will probably spend the rest of the night playing Battle Unicorn.
Perfect.
Sounds good. Well, my goodness. So, Sarah, I just want you to know that you are the first person who has ever lost internet during our Local Writer Read series, which I think means we're going to have a fantastic season, and I really appreciate that.
Well, I'm going to tell you a very quick story about that. My husband is a techie and prides himself on the fact that we apparently have, and there's some way to check, I don't know about this, we have the fastest internet in Bangor. And so I'm very excited to go downstairs and tell him that it's very fast and it also doesn't work. Thank you for bearing with me. I'm glad I was able to jump back on.
No, I'm actually, I brought it up just because, you know me, I'm always worried that something is going to go wrong. And I'm like, oh no, what if somebody, and Josh is always telling me, so the person will just jump back on. That's what'll happen and it'll be fine. And that's exactly what happened. You just jump back on and it was fine. So I think it's a great omen for our season and I really appreciate it. So you can tell your husband I appreciate it as well.
Happy to help in my own little way.
Made things nice and spicy.
And I actually did have one more question for Sarah. I think we have a few more minutes. Oh
yeah, we do.
Yeah. So I know you said that the novel has been kind of experimental and like trying to find the way through it. So I'm just curious because I'm always curious about process. Do you have a sense of its shape at this point, or are you still kind of playing with the different characters and things to find what that narrative is?
So I've been toying with this book for a decade, right? It's been 10 years I've been writing into this material, and I did an MFA, and during my, in writing school, I was really pushed toward traditional plot. We studied rising action and falling action, and I don't write that way. And so it was I sort of got lost for a long time trying to turn this into, a hero's journey and a coming of age story. And that's not what it was. And what's been really interesting the last few years, people have been writing a lot about alternative plot structures and how the way we tell a story doesn't have to be this, Greek tragedy version of storytelling. And so that has helped freed me up a lot to think of this book as a very different thing. And so what it's sort of becoming is a more episodic. So I don't know if you've read House on Mango Street or Citizen, or even Girl Interrupted sort of follows this structure where it's just sort of vignettes, and it's not, no one is completely changed at the end. There's not some huge climax, but it's sort of a peek inside a world you might not otherwise know. And so that has helped me a ton feel more able to tell the story the way that feels natural to tell this story. And so that has been really good for me.
It's really working. We've had this conversation before. I love work like that. And like, as you say, there are many examples of it working very well. When we have more time to talk, I have a memoir that I really want you to read, because it's written in the same way, but I can't remember the title of it now, so I don't want to stumble over, but just remind me. I absolutely love work like this. So many people do. You've read Safekeeping, right? That's another one.
No,
I'll like that.
Oh. Yeah, it's fun. Now that I'm looking for it, I'm like, wow, they're everywhere. We just don't talk about them in that way, which is great. I'm in the middle of reading, Matthew Salisi has this great new book called Craft in the Real World, which looks at how craft and the way we talk about writing is really grounded in culture, and how Western culture is really grounded in the 3-act drama, and how that's books that do really well here often don't do well in other parts of the world that have other ways of understanding story and other ways of understanding conflict. And so that portion of his book has really been speaking. I keep returning to it over and over. It's really good.
Well, and then Josh had made that very point just the other night in a conversation he was having. And what I always come back and say is, even in our culture, this is the thing. It's not just that there are other ways of understanding or other ways of telling stories, in other parts of the world. It's actually always been the case right here in our world, that we tell stories in many different ways, and that they're very successful. There's for some reason, that kind of traditional shape and arc has sort of gained ground and became the thing we talked about the most, probably because it's the easiest thing to teach. But we have many other ways of doing it. And I mean, if you just go back to Tristram Shandy, like what some people think of as the first novel, come on. I mean,
could not be more digressive. Yeah,
exactly. So we just have to embrace all the things that are right in front of us, all the things that we know we love and enjoy.
And to stop calling it traditional, because it's not, there are lots of traditions. This is the 3-act structure, and there are other ways of telling. Like, even sort of changing my language has helped me not feel like I have to write it this way if it's long form. So
right. Yeah. The other thing I always argue against is that I don't think that the character has to transform. I really don't. And I tend to write a lot of stories where the characters go right back to being who they are from the very beginning, because I think that people do that. I think it's actually pretty rare that people make fundamental change, certainly in the course of action that can happen in a short story. And it's more interesting to see how they resist change, and
all the different ways people resist change. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's part of why I am drawn to your writing.
Oh, thank you. And speaking of that, don't be sad about spending a decade on something. Sometimes that's what it takes. That's you just read my manuscript recently, and that sucker has been in the works since 2006. So that's just what it takes.
It takes what it takes. Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, no, and part of the reason I was curious, I did a writing live stream a few days ago, and we were talking about story structure and like the 6 different story shapes that people have plotted out and various things. But it's interesting you mentioned the hero's journey, because I was at Boscone, which is a pop fiction literary conference earlier in the year, and they had a whole panel on deconstructing the hero's journey, and like looking at whether it still applies, and what are other stories doing that are different than kind of that structure. And even just thinking, and like we said, these shapes have been around for a long time, but more recently seeing like short story collections as novels and mosaic novels in the slice of life. Like, I think these things are rising into more kind of mainstream awareness, which is really fun to see people playing with not only what stories are they telling, but how are they telling them. I think it sounds like you're exactly in that camp of just kind of capturing a different way of conveying that experience, which is really exciting. So I look forward to seeing more. And I agree, the time is all over the place for how these things happen. There are people who write the novels in 2 months and publish it, of which I'm jealous. And then there are those of us who take a bit longer to get things done. So
Yeah, and part of me feels like this may be like the only book I have in me, and it's okay to take a while. This is the story I have to tell, and I want to tell it the best way I can.
We do actually have a question in the comments for both of us from Gary. Gary's a Central Maine photographer, and in real time he captures all of our events in photograph, which is great. So hi, Gary.
Hi, Gary.
And so his question, he was saying that for both of us, we do a great job of creating a sense of place, the green and the halfway house. And then he asked, do you envision yourself in that place when you write? Because it seems as though you are there. So would you like to start that, or do you want me to take it first?
Sure. I absolutely do. I mean, I will sometimes be at my desk and close my eyes and imagine that I am in this place. And for me, I don't know, writing is sort of like an altered state for me in some ways. And the sort of deeper I can pretend to be in the place I'm writing about, the more I'm able to capture the sensory details that might be there that sort of bring it to life. So yeah, in my head, I definitely have this like weird, almost movie set of the novel that I walk through and I visit and I think on all the time.
Yeah, and I think it's similar for me. I have kind of a cinematic imagination sometimes. And the green in particular, I've only been to a real swamp like once. So I was not drawing from a whole lot of personal experience, but I combined like movies and a bit of research on swamps with Maine does have a certain level of humidity in the summer, which I was able to pull from. And Maine also has lots of bugs. And so I was able to draw from my dislike of biting insects, and then I just kind of added more of a range to them because the green has much more significant insect population than Maine does. So it was a mix of things that I did have familiarity with, and then just that cinematic imagination to kind of fill out the rest of the gaps. And people that have been in areas like this that are much more humid and swampy have said it came across as authentic. So apparently it worked to an extent, but yeah, I'm glad it comes across that way as well.
I just have to say, you need to take a couple of field trips to the rural South if you think Maine has a lot of bugs. That's all. I'm just going to say that.
Well, I'm thinking particularly of the horrible swarms of black flies, which feel enormous to me because I hate them.
It feels enormous to you because you've never been to the rural South. That's why they feel enormous to you.
Yeah, well, which is having fun with the cicada uprising right now. So
oh gosh,
that sound I remember.
Yes,
sound. Oh
yeah,
endless. Didn't sleep.
It's disgusting. Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
That's okay, Josh. I was gonna say, and you have such, I am able to pull on things that people are familiar with, right? Like the idea of a coffee maker or a creaking stair, or what it is to be in an old house is something that is generally familiar or accessible to readers, something they have seen before. And I am always in awe of how both sci-fi and fantasy writers are able to, in a matter of a chapter, create this entirely new sort of not just world, but culture and way of being in the world. And you do that so well in your book. It's part of why I love reading fantasy and sci-fi.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, and for me, that's one of the things I really like about writing. I have a harder time with contemporary because it is so familiar to readers, and so I feel more pressure to get the details right. Whereas with speculative fiction, like I can make up whatever I want to, and so it needs certain kind of grounding touchstones to make it familiar enough. But I like the freedom of making my own rules. It's part of the fun for me of writing in those genres. Oh, and Claire, Anthony is in the comments agreeing with you about the bugs. As a former Georgia boy, he says.
That's right. Anthony knows. Maine's got nothing on the South when it comes to bugs. Just trust us.
I have my husband is from Malaysia, which is right on the equator. And so we also familiar with a whole other different realm of bugs and snakes and the whole thing.
Oh, snakes. Yeah.
Talk about that though. I'm okay. We'll just pretend.
Okay.
that word.
Nice.
So we are coming up on time. Claire, Sarah, any final comments before we wind this down, or questions or anything?
I just want to thank Sarah again for being our buddy and helping us launch our new season. It's been so relaxing and fun and great to talk to you. Great to see you. So thank you for joining us again. And thank you both for sharing your good work. It was really nice to hear.
Thank you guys for keeping this running through this, through this pandemic. And I can't wait till we gather together again.
It's coming.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's been very fun to be able to keep this connection with so many people through this time. And like one of the benefits of virtual is I think being able to bring in more people and reach a wider audience for readers and just people tuning in. So again, thank you to anyone who is listening right now or who tunes in later on Facebook or YouTube. Feel free to share these videos with anyone. Our virtual events are all archived on YouTube, so you can go back and watch any of the events you've missed. Maine has so many fantastic writers, and it is an honor and a pleasure to be able to just host this space for other people. So yeah, Sarah, I will say as well, thank you for helping us kick off this season. It's always a delight to hear you read.
Likewise, thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah. So for anyone who is listening, tune in tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern time. We have our very own Claire and two more readers as well, Renee De Camillis and Lisa Mayer, who are both friends of the series and fantastic writers and performers and readers. So that's going to be a great time. Thank you to Quiet City Books. Courtney, I see you as well in the comments. Who hosts us in spirit, even though we are not physically there at the moment. But yeah, we hope to make it back to Quiet City Books soon, this year, hopefully. And the Lewiston Public Library, and we will be back. We have more of these to come, and it's going to be a great season. So we're definitely looking forward to it.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
See you next time.
Good night, everyone.